Hi, you made it to my channel, the Niche Gaming Hub. Today I'm going to review the Ford CLT 9000. As with all of my reviews, they're based on my New Game Plus settings and regions where I use the trucks. At the time of this review, I have completed Alaska. I purchased the Ford CLT 9000 in this region and use it here some, but actually mostly in Michigan through my extra save file, which I made for vehicle testing, so that I don't mess with my main playthrough file, because I didn't use this truck enough in Alaska, where I actually bought it. So in my main playthrough, the New Game Plus rules I select balance fun and challenge. I start off with some extra money and get 3 times more income per job so that I can buy some extra trucks and upgrades. My rules make buying all add-ons possible right from the start, which actually doesn't matter after Alaska anyway, because you get to the rank 30, but I do get that from the very start of my playthrough, giving me a bit of a head start. My rules allow me to sell trailers and trucks back for 50% of their value, but on the flip side, my rule settings make automatic truck recoveries and auto loading 4 times more expensive and fuel 6 times more expensive. They make all garage repairs cost money, and all parts repairs cost 2 times more points than normal for trucks within their region and 4 times more for trucks outside their region. Traveling between regions is paid, and when you buy a fuel add-on for any truck, you have to fill it with fuel from what you have in the region. I restrict contests to only 1 try, so you can't use them to farm money. I may mention hard mode every now and then, discussing how use of a truck might differ if you play in that mode, because I know many people play it. In the case of the CLT 9000, the discussion will be more whether or not you should even buy this truck in hard mode or whatever. Hard mode does require you to suffer through many weaker vehicles just so you can survive, whereas I prefer to have a little bit of luxury so that I can evaluate the differences between the trucks, use their advantages, and have a good playthrough. I still won't be able to be reckless with my money or trucks, and some rules add more difficulty than hard mode, but the realistic simulation and challenge is still there. Now with that context in mind, talk about the Ford CLT 9000. The Ford Motor Company is a global automotive giant formed by its visionary founder, Henry Ford. He experimented with gasoline engines and built his first self-propelled vehicle, the quadricycle, in 1896. Ford founded the Detroit Automobile Company in 1899, but it dissolved 2 years later. He also created the Henry Ford Company in 1901, but left them in 1902. This same company later became what we now know as Cadillac. On the 16th of June 1903, Henry Ford officially incorporated the Ford Motor Company in Detroit, Michigan. The company operated out of a converted wagon factory on Mack Avenue, and they produced their first vehicle called Model A by July 23rd of the same year. Early models, designated alphabetically, followed, but the game changer did not come until October of 1908, called Model T. This car was designed for affordability, reliability, and ease of repair, aiming to make automobile ownership accessible to the average American. Ford and its Model T revolutionized personal transportation. Ford acquired the Lincoln Motor Company in 1922 to offer a luxury brand of cars to its customers. Production of Model Ts ceased in 1927, and then Ford introduced a newer Model A featuring more modern styling and advanced features. In 1932, Ford introduced the first low-cost V8 engine. In 1938, the Mercury division was formed to offer mid-price cars in between the Ford and Lincoln brands. When World War II broke out, Ford halted commercial production and supported the war effort. In the post-war era, new ideas from so-called whiz kids led to engineering marvels and the development of iconic Ford vehicles. In 1948, the first purpose-built trucks were manufactured and the F-Series commenced, and thus the pickup truck was born. In 1954, Ford gave the world the Thunderbird, and in 1964, they gave us the Mustang, both iconic convertibles that have had a lasting impact on the automotive industry and American culture. Ford had been looking to the international expansion from its very founding and steadily building its empire throughout the globe. In 1979, they acquired a significant stake in the Mazda Motor Corporation, and in 1989, they acquired Land Rover, which was later sold. In the early 2000s, of the 3 automotive giants of America, Ford is the only one to not file for bankruptcy and not require government bailout. Ford has always focused on innovation in design, safety, and technology, adapting to changing consumer demands and environmental regulations. The introduction of the Mustang Mach-E in 2020 and the F-150 Lightning in 2021 represents Ford's commitment to the electric vehicle market. Ford has always been at the forefront of the newest technology and lives on as one of the largest manufacturers of the automotive industry in the entire world. Ford has been most successful in the car and light truck segments of the automotive industry, but they did make an attempt to penetrate the heavy truck markets. F-Series was launched back in 1948 and they accounted for all of Ford's light and heavy trucks. With the 1957 introduction of the C-Series, low cab, cab-over engine, Ford began to transition its heavy truck lineup away from models derived from the F-Series line. In 1961, the Super Duty F-Series F750 to F1100 was redesigned with a heavier-duty chassis, and in the same year, Ford introduced the H-Series heavy truck as a C-Series successor. The H-Series mounted the cab higher on all new chassis with Ford-mounted axle, taking on the two-story Falcon nickname. While the Super Duty V8 was standard, the optional Cummins NH Inline 6 was the first factory-installed diesel offered in a Ford truck. In 1963, Ford introduced an N-Series, a short-hood conventional truck similar in concept to the 1948 to 1956 cab-forward C-Series. The N-Series shared much of its front bodywork with the H-Series, moving the cab upward and forward, the latter to shorten the overall length of the vehicle. This cab structure resembled that of the F-Series. In 1966, the W-Series Class A8 cab-over engine line succeeded the H-Series. A clean sheet design, distinguished by its straight edge, the W-Series was offered solely with diesel engines. An all-aluminum cab was offered as a weight-reducing option. In 1969, Ford completed construction of the Kentucky Truck Assembly, a facility in Louisville that was meant for commercial truck production. But when it finally opened, they manufactured only cars, with light truck production soon to follow. In the years to come, Ford sought to consolidate the N-Series and the heavy F-Series into a single, all-new product line and move away from the aging W-Series. With the L in L-Series denoting its Louisville origins, the new product line featured a larger cab, adding the front hinged hood. In 1978, Ford launched the CLT 9000, a cab-over-engine heavy-duty truck model that was part of Ford's L-Series. It was a counterpart to the conventional hooded LTL 9000 models, sharing many components and design elements with the broader L-Series, but offering improved driver comfort and ergonomics, even featuring options like air ride cap suspension on later models. The CLT designation stood for cab over tandem, indicating a cab over engine configuration with tandem rear axles. The CL models were single rear axle versions. The Ford CLT 9000 was available with a range of big-bore, premium diesel engines from Cummins and Caterpillar. These engines typically range from 300 to 400 plus horsepower, catering to various heavy-duty hauling needs, but some go well above that, even above 500 horsepower, which was very rare for couplings, but they did happen. In the early 1990s, Ford began to phase out its cab-over-engine models in North America, including the CLT 9000, as conventional long-nose trucks gained more popularity due to factors like longer wheelbases, better fuel efficiency based on aerodynamics, and allowing for smoother rides and easier engine access. Ford ceased production of the CLT 9000 in 1991. The Ford Cargo, a European cab-over design, was briefly introduced in North America as a medium-duty truck but did not fill the heavy-duty cab-over engine void left by the CLT 9000. Ford even tried to stay competitive with the Aeromax line, featuring some of the most aerodynamic trucks in North America. Still, at the end of 1996, Ford completed the sale of its heavy truck operations, selling the rights and production tools of the Louisville Aeromax and Cargo to Freightliner. Gradually, Ford's foray into the heavy-duty truck market came to an end, with Freightliner ending production for good by 2009. Ford's success was primarily in the light truck market. F-Series is still successful to this very day, and of course its normal vehicles, sedans, and hatchbacks and everything else that Ford is known for. This CLT 9000 was in fact a product of a failed foray. It wasn't that it was a really bad truck, it just was outclassed by other trucks, and Ford, they stopped with their heavy truck manufacturing and stuck to what they do best. In SnowRunner, the Ford CLT 9000 is available for purchase in the truck store for $41,300 in game currency, plus the cost of upgrades. You can find the best engine in the Island Lake map of Michigan and the raised suspension in the North Port map of Alaska. I have a tendency to want to buy trucks that the game gives upgrades for. It just kind of gives me ideas. And it was the Island Lake map engine upgrade that got me thinking about getting this truck as a fuel carrier. Bear in mind that in my new Game Plus rules, I have fuel costing 6 times more than the default. I'll explain later in this video why this is relevant. SnowRunner puts this truck in its highway category, and I put it in my pure highway classification as well. Now let's talk about the dimensions and design of this cab-over engine straight edge truck. Length 8.3 meters, width 2.4 meters, length to width 3.458. The ratio, it's a little high from the perspective of body balance. Height to width, high. It's a lot higher than it is wider as compared to many trucks, so the ratio is just not nice. It doesn't look good for body balance. The weight in real life was 15,432 pounds, around about 7.5 tons, or 7.6 tons I believe, and the in-game mass rating is 7,150. Body balance I actually classify as good and with the raised suspension. But because the Ford CLT 9000 is a highway truck and meant to be kept on paved roads, I just didn't get enough usage on bumpy, uneven terrain so I could test the limits of its body balance. But based on my experience and understanding of its dimensions, weight, center of mass, and the experience that I had in Michigan where I did take it down the quarry and did take it on off-road as much as I could, as much as the assignment required, I found the body balance to actually be quite good. Yes, the length to width ratio is larger than I would like, and it's significantly higher than it is wide, based on the cab-over engine design with straight edge, but I think the weight plays a part in keeping it upright in most cases, particularly the bottom-heavy nature of the weight, because of where the engine is located in this truck in real life. So the engine was located more at the bottom, and that does help with body balance. The CLT 9000 is smaller than most of the heavy-duty trucks we've come across, yet it is one of the heavier vehicles. So the extra weight does help the smaller truck in maintaining its body balance. Even with a loading crane attached and multiple pieces of cargo, I found the truck highly resistant to tipping over, and this is with the raised suspension equipped. The Ford CLT 9000 has a configurations typical of a pure highway truck, not suitable for off-roading. Configuration 6x4, no all-wheel drive. Differential lock, not available. As I stated in my International TrendStar 4070A review, since just about all of the heavy-duty trucks we've encountered thus far, namely the White Western Star 4964, GMC MH9500, the International Fleet Star F2070A, as well as the medium-duty, the Chevrolet Kodiaq C70 and the International Lodestar 1700, all had commercial logistics as at least part of their known functions, in addition to all of their other usage: farming applications, military transport, crane support, school buses, transit buses, fire trucks, dump trucks, etc. They would all split time on-road and off-road depending upon their owner's requirements. And the ones that were known to be used more for off-road had differential lock and all-wheel drive already installed. So it stands to reason that they all would have the option to become off-road capable. But SnowRunner decided to restrict some purely to the road, like the International TrendStar 4070A and the Ford CLT 9000. Is there any evidence that these two trucks were restricted to paved road travel? No. Is there any evidence that these trucks were more frequently utilized for commercial logistics than the other heavy-duty trucks? Maybe, but I didn't read or see enough evidence to make such a statement. In fact, I saw cases of the CLT 9000 and the TrendStar 4070A preferring off-road transport. In real life pictures you can even find on the internet. The Cat CT680 and CT681 were both almost always used as dump trucks and concrete mixers, but they spent time on the paved roads, needing highway or all-terrain tires to reduce fuel consumption and maintain good traction on the asphalt. Based on the usage of a truck, if a owner knows that the truck's going to be on the road 80% of the time, for example, then it has to have tires suitable for that. for traction, and for fuel efficiency. The GMC MH9500 and Fleetstar F2070A were both known for commercial logistics more than anything else, but they were utilized for all aforementioned heavy-duty jobs as well. As I mentioned in their reviews, SnowRunner simply decided that the International TranStar 4070A and the Ford CLT 9000 will be pure highway trucks, so players should utilize them accordingly. So when is differential lock and all-wheel drive needed? How exactly does it affect off-roading capabilities? Well, on roads, icy or normal, as long as you have suitable tires, you'll be just fine. Going downhill is obviously going to be easier than uphill. I completed the Work for Old Sweat contract in Michigan, in Smithville Dam Quarry, and when I went down, there were a few spots that slowed me down, but I was able to use the winding road to get to the bottom and deliver the cargo. However, when I tried to go back up, I was able to climb up a bit after much efforts, but at one point, even though I had UOD2 tires equipped on this CLT 9000, I couldn't progress further and had to recover the truck back to the garage. I later tried to take wooden planks to Drummond Island, and I was able to progress to the middle of the map actually, staying near where I can winch to poles or other fixtures, but I would never take this on rocks, in water, even the shallow water, in deep mud or snow, and everything else many of your other trucks have to be able to traverse in order to complete tasks. Sometimes in early maps, it feels like you can get away with having highway trucks like this, but very soon, even in Black River, Michigan, you realize how important differential lock and all-wheel drive actually are. You just can't depend on a truck that doesn't have both to complete enough of the tasks, not without constantly being rescued or winching throughout, making your trip drawn out and drain all of your fuel for the easiest jobs of the game. For the gearbox, I would use the Balancer Highway. Since you shouldn't be using this truck for off-roading, you might as well use the gearboxes that are most fuel efficient. This truck does get the UOD2 set like the other heavy-duty class gets, but is it actually useful? Tires are 43-inch off-road UOD2, standard 0.8 in the asphalt, 3.0 in off-road dirt, and 1.9 in the mud, and of course the chain UOD3 all chains, 1.2 in the asphalt, 3.0 in the off-road dirt, and 1.3 in the mud, just like all of the heavy-duty class. Same two sets. The UOD2 do significantly better in mud, and the UOD3 are required for icy regions, in addition to giving you more control on roads. The suspension can be stock, you can leave it stock, but then you don't get to use the 43-inch tires. The Ford CLT 9000's tires are smaller and no better than those accessed by the rest of the heavy-duty trucks. They're certainly not going to help this truck be any more off-road capable. Since we're not dealing with a long highway travel, that level of fuel efficiency won't matter, so there is no real benefit to equipping highway tires, since most of SnowRunner terrain is off-road. It's better to equip the 43-inch off-road UOD2, which require race suspension, just to give yourself the best chance to cross the mud or snow patches where you encounter them. Always staying near some posts, tree trunks, or something else you can winch to when necessary. Of course, when you travel on icy roads for the maps that have them, you'll want to equip the 43-inch chained UOD3 all chains. The maneuverability is typical of the larger heavy-duty trucks, larger than one would expect for a smaller vehicle. Steering, I would say medium turning radius, control, excellent. The Ford CLT 9000's turning radius is on par with the heavy-duty class and maybe leaning more towards large than the others, but because the truck is smaller, the turning radius ends up staying near medium. In contrast, the size of a large truck like the Western Star 6900 Twin Steer would have an opposite effect. Even though the vehicle's front tandem axle wheels can turn at a very sharp angle, because the truck is so long and large, the turning radius is going to be very large for that big rig no matter what. There was no noticeable terrain feedback, and the truck seems to maintain excellent control even with the wrong tires on the asphalt, like the off-road UOD2, going at its maximum speed. With the chain tires on icy roads, I didn't notice any slipping at all either. Ford gave powerful engine options to this truck in real life, but SnowRunner puts it in the heavy-duty class, which was actually more reasonable. and more typical of the way this truck was used. More in that category. The real-life Maximum engine, which was very rare that Ford would couple that. At least it was a maybe commercial option, but very rarely was this ever used. But the highest option available that I could find commercially available for this truck, and not even mentioned in the brochures, but was available, was a Cummins N14 turbocharged diesel inline 6-cylinder, 5.5-inch bore, 6-point-inch stroke, 14-liter displacement, 525 horsepower, 1850 pound-force-feet torque at 1200 RPM, with a max gross combination weight estimated at around 200,000 pounds, about 100 tons. But this is well over the typical. Like typical, you might have 300 horsepower up to maximum 400 horsepower engines for this type of truck. It was made as a heavy-duty hauler, a workhorse in real life, but that engine is rare, but it was available. The game engine is a GB-6V 2400A, 155,000 torque rating. Mass, as I mentioned earlier, was 7,150. Gives you a power to weight ratio of around 21.678. As I mentioned, the highest commercially available engine for the Ford CLT 9000 in real life was the Cummins N14, although this was not advertised as an effective combination in any brochure and was very rare to come across. While I estimated the gross combination weight rating to be 200,000 pounds for this beast of an engine, since weaker engines were more typically coupled with this truck, the highest GCWR I found in their advertising was 138,000 pounds. That's good reference for what the truck was expected to do. Because if you have a typical company and you tell them, okay, the fuel consumption is going to go by 50% with this engine, but power you're only going to get 20% more, then it's more efficient and better for this truck, and in other ways as well. Couple it with the a little weaker engine, but more suitable for the truck. In the game, its engine power is on par with many of the heavy-duty trucks, featuring a power-to-weight ratio in that neighborhood as well. The Ford CLT 9000 has a fairly large fuel tank and excellent fuel efficiency. But how useful is that for a pure highway truck in a hardcore off-roading game? Fuel tank is 280 liters. The fuel consumption efficiency, the most stable, highest fuel expenditure, often an average of the upper range of the fuel consumption spikes when the engine is under the heaviest stress from sideboard plus attached cargo or a fully loaded semi-trailer, on rough terrain, traveling fast in auto, or in rare cases going in low plus, is approximately 10.1 liters per minute. Off-road gearbox, no all-wheel drive or diff lock obviously. And this was not easy to achieve and discern, especially because when you get to such off-road terrain that the truck has trouble, it would either slow down or get stuck. Now if you keep the same conditions but only change the gearbox to a highway one and the tires to chained, you get the most stable, highest fuel expenditure figure to be around 8.8 liters per minute. Highway gearbox, no all-wheel drive or diff lock. Of course, if you equip chain tires, it will be for icy roads, and you only have to step into off-road patches on the main roads, which is where the highest fuel expend figure comes from. But bear in mind that the typical consumption will be much lower because most of the time you're on the road. Consumption depends upon damage status, terrain, gearbox, and load, carried on rear tandem axle plus haul trailers. I can and do go over the stable or average figures mentioned above. The best comparison I have is the International TranStar 4070A, but for that truck I had the balanced gearbox equipped, and I actually don't know whether this gearbox has better fuel efficiency than the highway one. I think they're pretty close. At least that's what the way the game shows it. If you look at equipping either one of these, you typically get the same fuel efficiency rating in the garage user interface. Regardless, the Ford CLT 9000 is significantly more fuel efficient than the TranStar. It seems that even if you were to give it all-wheel drive and diff lock, it still wouldn't drink the fuel that the heavy-duty class does, with most of those figures being well over 18 liters per minute, and this truck being around 9 liters per minute. This is especially impressive considering that this truck in real life was a late 70s, 80s, and early 90s truck and had a cab-over engine and straight-edge design instead of a long-nose one, which affected aerodynamics and thereby fuel efficiency. Plus, the CLT 9000 was built primarily as a heavy-duty workhorse, but at comparative engine power, it still got better miles per gallon fuel efficiency than most of the trucks in its class. It is the same in StormRunner. Now, when talking about the fuel efficiency of pure highway trucks like this and the Trendstar, players can sometimes get excited. I see it on the internet or maybe other places in SnowRunner videos or whatever, and they forgot about the fuel cost of struggling through terrain that these trucks aren't suited for. All the winching required and incredibly slow movement, assuming you don't get stuck altogether. And then there's the recovery, rescue, and or repair costs of getting these trucks out of their messes and either escorting them back to the garage or helping them complete their assignments. All that help costs fuel and time and everything else. It's not a good way to play. And certain assignments you won't be able to complete with these trucks, even with help. As the game progresses, you get less and less roads, making these trucks inefficient or downright useless for the majority of your SnowRunner tasks, contracts, and contests. So what can you actually use this truck for in SnowRunner? The Ford CLT 9000 does get all the typical heavy-duty add-ons, and the Crane Plus sideboard bed plus trailer combo does in fact work. But what are you going to do with it? It's only some early maps that have lots of roads, but as you progress in SnowRunner you get less and less road and more challenging terrain. So you won't be able to complete many assignments with this truck. Can't rely on it for anything except to hold on to fuel. Since almost all of SnowRunner terrain is off-road, often dipping into heavy mud, marsh, snow, ice, and even water, this is the wrong game for pure highway trucks. Having said that, if you use New Game Plus rules that increase the cost of bought fuel, only then will it be worthwhile to save fuel from early game regions to use in future more difficult regions, where fuel may be scarce and expensive. Trucks cost in-game currency, fuel carrier add-ons cost currency, transferring the truck from one region to the other costs currency, so it doesn't make sense to invest in pure fuel trucks if the cost of fuel isn't high enough to justify all of the cost to save and then transfer that fuel from early game regions to future ones. For me, I jacked up the fuel cost to 6 times more than the default. Fuel ranges between 3 and 6 currency per liter by default. Multiplying by 6, I have to purchase fuel at 18 to 36 currency per liter. This would make a typical 1800 liter tank of fuel cost 32,400 to 64,800 depending on where you get that fuel if you're getting it from the station. A typical fuel tank frame add-on costs 5,700, and then there's the cost of the truck and its upgrades, and then the cost of moving the truck from one region to the other. For me, it's worth it to save this fuel and to buy trucks like the Ford CLT, which is rare though. I mean, in most cases I would use trucks that I got for free or bought for other reasons, and then they were no good to me anymore because I got better trucks. So once they're obsolete, then I just turn them into fuel trucks. Or trucks that I find and I just have no good use for, turn them into fuel trucks. But it's still, because of how much I increased the fuel costs, it does make financial sense to buy the Ford CLT 9000 so you don't have to waste one of your actual haulers for this function. Because there's so much fuel you get, especially from Michigan and Alaska. For players who don't change the setting or play in hard mode, I can't imagine why you would ever buy this truck and what you could possibly use it for. Maybe in the first 2 regions it might seem like it's a good investment. I still think that's a big waste. You get enough trucks from what you find in the first 2 regions. Why would you pay for this truck? It really doesn't make any sense to me. So for my verdict, the Ford CLT 9000 is a pure highway truck, but SnowRunner is a hardcore off-roading game. The truck gets access to the typical add-ons that the heavy-duty class gets, and the loading crane plus flatbed plus trailer combo does work for this hauler. But it just doesn't seem that useful because of the lack of off-roading capabilities. Namely, the differential lock and all-wheel drive are simply unavailable. It has the expected turning radius for trucks of its size, and the body balance is pretty good. Engine is on par with the heavy-duty trucks we've dealt with so far, and the fuel consumption is superb. But only if you keep it primarily on roads and away from terrain it can get stuck on. The tires are a bit small, even after race suspension upgrade. 43 inches just aren't large enough to compensate for everything else about this truck that makes it unsuitable for this game. In short, if you don't increase the cost of fuel in your New Game Plus rules, there will be no benefit of buying and upgrading this truck and then equipping the fuel carrier add-on. If you're playing in hard mode, I would never buy this truck, ever. Only stick with the vehicles you can find and buy the ones you really need for your playthrough. And this wouldn't be one of them. The Ford CLT 9000 was a nice enough heavy-duty workhorse in real life, but because SnowRunner didn't give it all-wheel drive and differential lock, it feels like it's in the wrong game. That's it for this review. You can share your comments. Different people have different ideas on the Transstar and the Ford CLT 9000. Some people swear by it and say because they're really good players, they can find a way to use it. Okay, that's fine. Use it however you want. It's your playthrough. It's your game. To each his own. Everyone has their own opinion. No problem. Share your comments. I'm happy to listen to those comments, even if I disagree. And we can discuss there if you want. No problem. If you liked the video, give me a like, share, subscribe. Thanks for watching. This is Niche Gaming, signing off.